Hey, so we are officially recording, and my name is Sadie Hartmann, Mother Horror, with another book chat with my impromptu buddy reader. It just sort of like happens, Christopher Buehlman. Hi, Christopher.
Hello, Sadie. Good to see you.
Christopher Buehlman is a phenomenal writer with lots of amazing books that we're going to talk about in another video as per his request. I could talk about it for a long time, but today we're going to talk about this beast.
Yes.
And this is Adam Nevill's book, Cunning Folk. This is his recent release. This came out in October of 2021. And as it turns out, I decided that I was going to save for myself two books to read at Christmas time. Between Two Fires and Cunning Folk. And I really treated myself. I just have to say, if I could do it again and pick two different books for Christmas, these would still be the same books that I would pick, because that was a treat. Wouldn't you agree?
The Cunning Folk certainly was. Yeah, it was absolutely amazing. I've liked Neville for a couple of years now. I discovered him like 2-3 years ago, maybe. The first Adam Nevill book I read was Last Days. And have you read that one?
No, but every time I talk about his books, people recommend that one to me.
Yeah, and the weird thing is, I accidentally-ish read Brian Evanson's book of the same name, Last Days, thinking it was going to be this one I'd heard about from Neville.
Yeah.
And weird and surprisingly and serendipitously, that's a damn good book too.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Yeah. So two excellent horror novels, both called Last Days, but Neville's scared the shit out of me. And I'm a tough room. That's a scary book. In part because and I'm not going to give you any spoilers, but in part because the antagonists, one of the things they antagonize is your sleep.
Oh,
and things fucking with your sleep is pretty scary.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that is scary.
Yeah, these entities called they call old friends. Watch out for those guys. They are very, very frightening. So yeah, I knew I was in for a treat with Cunning Folk, so that's why I saved it for myself for Christmas, as you did.
Yeah, and then I tagged you in that post on Twitter because I was reading your book as well for Christmas, and then you said, "Oh, you know that I'm reading that too," just like Rosemary's Baby in October. So it is serendipitous that we decided to read this in the same month. And my first Neville read was The Ritual. And I actually watched the Netflix adaptation first with my husband and my son, and we all three loved it so much. And I was like, if this is based on a book, I have to read it right away. So I ordered it, read it, thought it was terrifying. It's, the book and the movie are kind of like, at one point they diverge towards the end. The ending's a little bit different on the movie than it is in the book, but they're both great and terrifying. Like, if I go backpacking in the woods, I'm gonna definitely think about The Ritual and maybe rethink my plan, because that's the thing with Adam Nevill, is these ritualistic people who kind of are everywhere.
Folk horror. He has rapidly becoming the 21st century king of the folk horror genre.
Yeah.
And he's really got a handle on it. I read his book, The Reddening, as well.
Yes.
Yep.
That was my favorite book in 2019.
Oh yeah, I could see why. That's a good one. And the thing that's wonderful about Neville is, he's kind of got a terroir, because he's coming out of Cornwall, and that whole that rugged seacoast, southwest England thing shines through several of his books. He's also got a fun Instagram account, by the way.
Yeah,
he's always out there paddling around.
Yeah,
Pirate coves and shit.
poked fun at him the other day because he was outdoors in his kayak at this beautiful scenery. And I was like, wow, it must be so nice for you to be able to enjoy the outdoors, but you've totally ruined it for me because I'm terrified to go outside because of you. Yeah, the reddening, I actually recommend to a lot of people because the female protagonists were so good in that book. Oftentimes I feel like women are just propped up as the victims in the story, and these two women like they fight hard. So I thought that was, and just survive a lot of shit. So I thought that was really cool. But yeah, with Cunning Folk, oh my gosh, we need to get into this.
Yeah.
I definitely was in your DMs a couple times, like being like, okay, that was scary. And then maybe like 3 or 4 no, that was scary. And then towards the end, oh my God, I just couldn't even believe what I was reading. I think I was reading the whole last half of the book with my jaw open.
You and I have definitely been on a buddy read 2 for 2, bottom basement of Bad Neighbors.
Oh yeah, they're both like really bad neighbors.
Because the Moots are not entirely unlike the older couple from Rosemary's Baby.
No, you're right.
Yeah, and they're similar in that the Rosemary's Baby couple are very ingratiating because they're trying to recruit you, but the Moots are just not interested in recruiting you. They want you out. They want you to go. But what Bad Neighbors?
Yeah, it was sort of a trifecta of horror because I was saying in my review, you have the Bad Neighbors, which could be traumatizing all on its own. I don't know if anybody watching this video has had a situation with some neighbors that has been like volatile, but it's not fun when you live next door to some people that are really just making your life miserable. So that's awful. And then you have renovating a house, which is a nightmare all in itself. Home ownership, for those who don't know, my husband and I have owned several different homes, and we're always in a position of fixing up because, we started home buying when we were in our 20s. So we were upgrading every time. And oh my God, I can't the disasters that a home can throw at you are just terrifying.
I am becoming well versed in that. I have, my wife and I bought this house in Ohio in 2019, and I moved up from Florida. Right, I had a nice little tidy, easy, simple house in the suburbs that didn't need too much. I'd been doing the maintenance on it, so it was in good shape. And then I come here and we both fell in love with this big hybrid A-frame on an acre, but it was older and it needed stuff.
Yeah.
And it's been tough. It's been a drain, not just financially, but also on my time as a writer. I spend a lot of time having to talk to contractors and sort of be on call to answer questions when they're working on stuff at the house, and it's not easy to write like that. And it's been a lot.
So. Yeah. And so when our little couple, this little family shows up in the story, in this idyllic situation with this house that they bought, and it's like a fixer-upper, and it's immediately known that something terrible has happened in this house, that they know right off the bat. That's why they got it so cheap. So you have the horrible neighbors, the renovated house that had some horrible event happen in it. And then thirdly, you have these woods that are behind the house with something going on back there.
And the horrible event is served to you on a platter. It's the first, it's the prologue. It's the first thing, first thing you get. And I guess that's not a spoiler if it's the first thing that happens in the book, but I don't want to ruin it, but it's a fairly horrific scene, and there's a thing that you
Yeah.
wouldn't want to have happened in your house happens in the house in the very first scene.
I wonder if we should just say, like, this is going to be a spoilery video so that we can talk about the ending. I mean, we kind of did that with Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
I think we should just do that because part of the fun of this entire book is the escalation.
Yes. Oh my God. You think it's bad, and then
it's going to get a whole lot worse, right?
Oh yeah. So yeah, so first thing out of the gate, you're watching a dude lose control of his body and hang himself against his own will.
Right.
From a light fixture with a cord. And there's some being in the house clearly directing him. And that was a terrifying scene, you know?
Yeah, right.
Being a passenger in your own suicide.
Right. Right, because he clearly didn't want to do it.
No.
Yeah. And then I thought it was really odd how Tom, like, can see what's going on with the neighbors and is kind of just suspicious right off the bat, which is how I felt like I would be. I'm very skeptical of situations and very skeptical of people, so I could relate to Tom. But that's kind of maybe a fourth horror is how this situation, it almost all reminded me of Rosemary's Baby too, because Tom is very aware of this situation, what's going on, but like his wife, because maybe she's out of the house working or whatever, seems really blasé about what's going on with the neighbors.
And part of that is, as we learn, is because one feature of the way these people, the moots, come at you is that you are cursed.
Yeah.
And part of the curse could be that your spouse has an affair or hates you or tries to harm you or you don't know what. So the fact that the wife doesn't believe him and begins to think he's more, think more and more that he's bonkers, really tracks with the disunity that they sow with their nefarious magic.
Yeah, I mean, if my husband was behaving like that and I didn't see all the telltale signs that he had seen, he's like digging up shit in the yard. He's like finding little talismans and things like that. And I always was just kind of kept it in the back of my mind. Like, it's so odd to me that like she isn't picking up on all of this weirdness too. So you're right. Like they probably were sowing those seeds of discord between them in order to make it like, targeting specific people. And he was definitely targeted, and the daughter too.
Yeah, I tend to believe that if they were not actively working at the disunion of this couple, I think that they would have been able to talk and at least find some way to communicate about what is happening. But she just shuts down. She doesn't want to hear it. She looks at him like he's, nuts. And he's, and he sounds kind of nuts, but if he's able to show her things like, look, they buried a damn cat under the house or whatever, you'd think that you'd at least take a pause, whether you're a superstitious person or you believe in things like magic. You'd think you'd at least go, there's some psychosis at play here. There's something very wrong going on.
Right. And plus there's like weird people showing up at all hours of the day doing weird things.
Can I say that my favorite scene is not a straight up horror scene, although it is horrific in what it portends, but I love the scene where the lady cop shows up.
Oh, yeah.
He's thinking, okay, this is handled. The police are on it. But these guys, the moots, are sort of arcane nobility, and everybody in the town is fucking terrified of them. And we watch the policewoman actually, straight out of a book of witchcraft from the 17th century, gives the old lady the kiss of infamy and literally kneels and kisses her on the ass. What is worse than your enemy watching the local police you hope to help you literally kiss the ass of your enemy next door.
Yeah, the authority. Yeah. I mean, you would really feel helpless at that point.
Yes. Yes. It's it seems it's a well, let me back up before I talk about the trees. Let me back up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's the point of no return, that is.
Yeah.
But let me back up and say what a masterful job Neville does in setting up the stakes and setting up the fact that these guys are in it to win it. They can't leave.
Right.
You know, I've got a gothic horror novel called Those Across the River, and there's a couple that moves to a new house and things in the town get fucked up. And
Yeah.
there's the question, why don't they leave? And that question is always there.
Yeah.
That is basic to horror. And you have to have a good reason as the author. There has to be, even though we already know real humans don't need a good reason to stick around when shit is clearly awful. You know, all you have to do is look at anybody, you know, living, I don't know, on a Superfund site or living in horrible situations, some of which they actually could leave, but people sometimes just don't.
Yeah, that's always been like a frustrating situation where you're just like, I mean, horror kind of exists off the principle of they probably shouldn't be doing this. I mean, when you think about a lot of different situations that people get themselves into, like that's why I read horror, is because I'm so timid about everything. I don't go inside of caves. I don't jump out of airplanes. I don't go into the ocean. Like, there's a lot of things that I don't do specifically because I don't want to find myself in a situation where I have to survive some kind of horrible thing. And so horror kind of exists off of this principle of you really shouldn't be doing that. And like you said, with the trees, when he cut those trees down, I was like, that right there is where I separate myself from Tom. Like, Tom should never have gone there with those neighbors.
Horrible choice. Horrible choice.
Like you said, that's a turning point.
Yeah, yeah. And they address that later. There's a point where he's saying, well, I probably could have put everybody in the car and gotten out of there and been shut of this. But once he took that step, they're going to find you.
Yeah. And also, like you said, about not being able to leave, like anyone who's ever purchased a house knows once you get into the situation financially, it's very expensive to move. You know, every move costs thousands of dollars.
Yes. And if you're in a situation where there's a threat to life and limb, clearly you do it anyway with your butt. But Neville did such a good job of stressing the different perceptions he and his wife were having that you can't do that when your partner's not on board. He's not going to abandon his wife and kid. He's got to get the wife on board with them all leaving, and she thinks he's batshit crazy. So they can't leave.
That's true. They were in a really dire situation. And I thought it was really cool because Neville did bring in that third party with the person who kind of like knows what was going on or had like some kind of interaction with these people before, and then is kind of an expert in how to deal with this folky cult shit. And I thought that was really genius because I think at some point you as a reader are just kind of dying for Tom to get a bone here. You're just kind of like, won't somebody like just find, like side with Tom on this thing and realize that something bad's going on. So he has an ally, as unreliable as he is.
But he, and mercenary as he is too. So this character Blackwood comes in, and he's the rival magicker, and he's so clearly from the beginning we already know because we see him visit the Moots in their backyard.
Yeah, that's right.
And say, you already ruined my business. Why do you keep after me? And we get the idea these people are just ruthless and have no mercy. Um, but so we already know he's no match for them. So he shows up and he's going to help now. And you sort of already know that it's not going to be enough, you know?
Right.
Um,
Right.
I realize we've perhaps been a little remiss talking about all these things that happen. We haven't really addressed the antagonists themselves yet.
Right.
It's Medea and Magi Moot. And I love the descriptions of these folks. These are
Could you just like totally see them in your mind?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's got a hair helmet. She's got like an auburn, she's like a 70-ish lady with an auburn hair helmet.
Yeah.
And she's always puttering self-importantly around the garden. And she just hates you. As soon as she looks at you, she's like, she just you just know you've met this person in real life at some point. It just looks at you like you're a turd in a shirt.
Yeah, you're annoying. A turd in a shirt. Yeah, exactly.
And then
you get like very eccentric and just like odd, where you can't really get a handle on your standing with them. Like, are they well-meaning people who just have a hard time connecting with others, or are they married? Like, he really can't get a hold of like who they are or what their context is, and neither can the reader for quite some time. So it's not until later in the book Tom figures out that they're siblings.
Yes.
Not married.
How strange.
That was.
Yeah, and the husband, Magi Moot. I love the description of him as well, where she's got this hair helmet. He's got this bald crown with this fringe of white hair and a big white beard. Yeah. So he's got a sort of a goofy wizardly look, but he's also evoking, Neville evokes sort of old hippie, with the guy too. Like you could see this gentleman, running a I don't know, a shop in Glastonbury or something.
Yeah.
And but without all the sort of wisdom and gentleness you associate with folks like that. This is just this toxic old guy. And it's an interesting thing that you get into, like when you're talking about magic and what you get out of using it. Like why would you do it, and what does it cost? Like you get a thing like Rosemary's Baby, and the cost is because it's going on the Judeo-Christian structure. Then you're dealing with the cost of your immortal soul. You're going to go to hell because you're doing this. The devil will claim you one day. When you get into folk magic, it's not so clear. But when you're dealing with urban fantasy, that's another thing. Because I've got a book, The Necromancer's House, and magic in that costs something. It does. So we come to find out that the Moots are beholden to and in a precarious relationship with a captive deity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that they're not the real threat. They're more, what would you say, like guardians of were they holding
wardens?
Captive?
I'd call them wardens.
Wardens, yeah.
Because they've got it, it's imprisoned, and they've got to mind it, and yet they're exploiting it. They are in a hostile relationship with it.
Yeah.
They're forcing it to give them power and such, and they're sitting on it. So when we're looking at the situation of Tom and Fiona, Tom, because he's really alone in this.
Yeah.
You're like, he needs allies, and you're like, crusty old money grubbing Blackwood isn't going to help him really against these people and what they've got bottled. But I love the eventual resolution. I love where it eventually goes. I kind of suspected it might be going there. I was hoping it would, because it's a great ending.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, once I realized they've got an unwilling, powerful thing in a bottle, I'm like, well, clearly his most likely ally is the captive.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought too, like the way that they described, or the way that Adam described, like the people when they put their masks on.
Yeah.
So the woman wears a boar's mask, which is what is on the cover of this book. Like,
And what a
at first
cover.
you're just kind of like, when is this going to come into play? Well, she wears this, and he wears a hare. So he's got the rabbit ears, and he wears like a rabbit's mask. And it's interesting how their bodies are described. Like they almost are more youthful when they're wearing their beast masks and everything. So there's kind of like a timelessness there that they've been gifted maybe from the entity or from the power or serving the power that's trapped in the hillside. I mean, definitely they're in the position of power with this god that is in the in the forest. And our first the family, the first person who encounters what's going on back there is the little girl.
Gracie.
Yeah, and as a mom, that was really horrifying. But the parents just kind of like, they're traumatized by her event, but they don't really understand it, so it's kind of brushed aside.
And Neville, as as a dad, is doing a good job.
Yeah.
Showing just how important that little girl is to both of them.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Whatever else they disagree on, they will both take a bullet for her.
Right. But I thought that it was interesting that like because she's so young, she wasn't really able to like effectively communicate like what exactly happened out there. It's almost a little bit too ambiguous. But as a reader of horror, you're like, that's some serious shit going on back there. So like we know what could potentially be going on back there, and we know, and it wasn't, Adam did a good job of like not really divulging to us right away, like, is it the Moots who are, were a part of that situation, or is there something else going on? Like that question kind of lingered in my mind for quite some time, where you don't know if they're the only threat, or if there's something else. For me, anyway.
Right. I always felt that they were the threat.
I'm sure you did. Yeah.
Well, they were just so malicious.
Yeah.
There was nothing, you couldn't see anything redeeming about them. And I kept waiting to see if we're going to find out that they just seem crusty and they are keeping something in the woods from doing great further harm. But no, they're evil pricks, and they're exploiting and bullying and subjugating their community, and they are terrorizing and murdering people who move in next door because they just don't want anybody next door.
Yeah, mostly because they do want to just preserve their situation.
Couldn't they buy that house? couldn't their captive god like throw them some buckets, and couldn't they just buy the damn house and leave it
and just keep it for themselves so no one else can, you would think, but then there wouldn't be any horror
or fun for them because they clearly enjoy it.
Yeah, they clearly did. But I do think we should talk about the fact that the best part of the scariest part of the entire novel for me was when Tom finally has like nothing else to lose. I mean, I don't want to, just in case there is somebody watching this video who hasn't, like, you really should not watch this video if you haven't read the book.
Agreed.
Because the situation that happens with Gracie is like such a power moment.
Wow.
I mean, that was a jump scare for me, like where I just kind of like, it jolted me. I don't know if it jolted you.
It did. That was the most powerful moment in the book.
Yeah. That was serious.
The image. Neville's a master of the disturbing, macabre image. Yeah. And the image of this little girl who's been injured by a nail in a plank. The image of her being rushed to hospital with the plank covering her face like a caul. That was disturbing to the bones, and it was also an iconic image, almost like something off a tarot deck, you know?
Yeah, I mean, just the fact too that they didn't remove it, so she went through the whole hospital ride with a plank in her face, like in the back seat of the car.
Makes sense. You don't pull
Right.
a puncture wound. You don't pull the object out. You can bleed out or do further damage.
It was just so, like, to know that these people have no boundaries was really just like, this is not going to end well for this family. You know, that there's just, to do that to a little girl is just beyond wicked and cruel. And then when Tom just really has nothing else to lose and he goes back there and he like starts digging around where that entity is out in the woods, the deity. I just have to say, like, that whole, from that moment on, when he goes into that cavernous area where the deity is, to when he comes back and like after the deity was released, the punishment that is doled out to our two guardians, the Moots, man, that is intense horror. That, because Tom does his own version of justice and vigilante acts of cruelty to them, but then what the deity does to them was like terrifying.
As you'd expect. I mean, you fuck with your neighbor, you might get the shotgun. You fuck with a buried god, you're gonna get something worse.
you're gonna have some epic, torturous end to your life. Yeah, that was pretty amazing. I mean, just the visual of them floating and kind of rotating and all the bad stuff that happens to them at that moment.
Oh yeah. That was, that tapped into some imagery that I remember reading about Dr. Faustus after he sells his soul to Mephistopheles, and Mephistopheles comes for him, and you have I guess the German, sort of the legend itself out of Wittenberg, but then you have Goethe's Faust, but the one I'm most familiar with is Christopher Marlowe's The Tragedy of Dr. Faustus. But I heard from somewhere else, and this is more apocryphal, I think it was one of those old Time Life things, they referenced Faustus after he sold his soul, and the devil comes to collect, and horrible things were done to his body in his library, in his study. Like he was swabbed with his brains or whatever. So the idea that you treat with some fell power like that at your peril, and that when the bill comes due, it will be high indeed.
Well, I mean, the actual magnitude of this deity's power is best summed up at the end when we find out what ultimately happens to Tom.
Right.
Did that just kind of blow you away? Like, that's what made me want to have a movie done of this, because I think that would be like the most powerful ending in a movie ever.
Now, this would be a great feature. This would be a great feature film.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, so just for the people who are watching who have seen this, like, you want us to talk about it. So basically, our Tom, from battling this entire situation from beginning to end, has been committed to a mental health facility. And he's alone in his padded white cell. And he has drawings from his daughter, so he's obviously in communication with his wife and his child, but there's really just no hope for Tom. Like, he's going to be there for the duration. And then, curiously, some kind of worker there at the mental health facility comes in with a woman, and this woman is apparently a caseworker, and Tom is just really confused, like, I'm really not, I don't really understand like why you would even be visiting me. Like, you know, there's just this confusion here from Tom, and time has kind of stopped during this conversation. He realizes that this, you know, warden or whatever who's in charge of him is just kind of like checked out while he's having this conversation with this mysterious woman. And then they sit down at the table. And at this moment is when, in my reader's brain, I was kind of starting to work this out. What about you? Were you sort of like, I think I know what's going on here?
Yeah. I definitely got the idea that he was being approached by agents of the deity.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, I mean, it's almost like too crazy to even think about, but like basically he's given this ultimatum where he's just kind of the deity is thankful for the fact that Tom was the person who let him out, let the deity out, and now he's going to be rewarded with his freedom, but it's basically like you will bend the knee.
Yep.
You can get out, but you're going to bend the knee.
And I thought getting out, you know, but I was thinking, okay, getting out is going to mean some miracle is going to happen in the courts or something, and he's going to be released or whatever. But no, that's not what's happening. He's just given the power to mystically appear to and visit his daughter.
Yeah. Know? Yeah. And isn't he now going to be like a new kind of guardian in the place of the Moots? Like, did he get his own mask?
Yes, he did. But I don't know if it needs I think the mask is what conveys power.
Okay.
I think. I didn't get the impression.
He's a mouse now. He has a mouse mask.
Yeah. I don't think it needed a guardian out of him because he's stuck where he is, and this woman is on the outside. So I think it has guardians. I think it's just thanking him and giving him this gift.
But basically has to serve.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is like, it is very bone chilling. It's not an ideal ending. Like, you're not just free to go back and live your life. Like, you will have this connection to this awful thing who can do awful things.
Yep. Yeah. It's a great ending.
It was a great ending.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, that's Cunning Folk for everybody who hasn't read the book. Definitely read the book. Definitely read all of the backlist titles that Adam has to offer. That's what I'm currently doing, is I'm going to read Last Days because that has been recommended to me more than any other, I think.
I forgot to tell you on the subject of backlist, you know, when you're having a good conversation, these different threads take off and you bookmark things like, oh, I want to say a thing about this, but then the conversation moves on and you leave it behind. So one of those left by the side of the road bags I want to go pick up now is I have a little connection with The Ritual, kind of a funny one, in that the movie was directed by a brilliant filmmaker. One of my favorite younger horror filmmakers is a guy named David Bruckner, and he's also done some shorts, like in the movie the anthology Southbound, and in in the first VHS, he has a short in that. Well, when I got a break and I wrote a piece for the reboot of Creepshow on Shudder, and I wrote a piece called "The Man in the Suitcase," and Mr. Bruckner ended up directing that, and he told me I wasn't obviously around for the selection of writers, material, but he told me that he fought for the script, and I was so honored. I was like, oh my God, because I would have fought to have him direct it. So
yeah, that is really cool.
Yeah. God, he's good. And he really brought The Man in the Suitcase to life in ways that were better than what I had imagined, you know?
Yeah. Well, so I'm sure like a lot of people know this, but like I do talk a lot about the fact that like I can read horror, but it's really hard for me to watch it. So like I don't have a Shudder subscription.
Right.
I don't really watch a lot of horror. I have to be really careful about what I watch, especially like J horror for whatever reason. Like Japanese folklore is so fucked. Like I just like that stuff. My mom forced me to watch Ju-on with her, I don't know, many years ago, and I have never recovered, like never recovered. And I watched Hereditary in the theater, and I thought I was probably 10 minutes away from crawling underneath my chair and hiding. I was so terrified.
It's a scary movie.
It's just very visceral. Like it's a totally different experience for me.
Yeah. You know, you're sort of the opposite of my wife, because she loves to watch horror movies, but horror books get in her head too much. And
it's so weird.
Yeah. I had to actually tell her so she could read my books years ago when we were dating. I had to tell her anything that I write about is on your side. Okay. So any bad things would actually defend you against bad things from another guy's book.
Oh, hey, that works. Yeah.
So that seemed to work.
Yeah. Well, that monster, the thing in the woods, the creature
in the ritual. Yeah. Oh yeah.
That was wonderful.
Like, yeah, it was. Yeah.
That was very scary. And, you know, that kind of occult, like, you know, things hanging out in the woods and like, you know, just these guys who were so distracted with everything that was going on and not really paying attention to what they were seeing. Yeah. Like that is Adam Neville's wheelhouse, I think, is just these everyday people coming into contact with something that is just beyond.
Often ancient gods. I mean, that's what's going on in the ritual. That is an ancient god.
Yeah, an ancient god.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was, and the reddening too, the occult practices that were the ritualistic stuff that was going on in there was very serious.
Oh, and those fucked up cave hyenas.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, so great. Well, I don't know what our next buddy read is going to be, but we're going to have to pick something soon.
Well, let's, you know, we'll be sort of in each other's circles on Twitter, I'm sure. And I strongly suspect we'll find ourselves one of us will see the other one about to read something.
Yeah.
You know, so
something on the list.
Organic.
Yeah. I'll be keeping an eye on you, Christopher Buehlman.
Okay. I consider myself warned.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, and then definitely expect to come visit me again so that we can talk about my book stack that's coming with all your books in it.
Outstanding. All right. Thanks, Sadie. This was fun.
Yeah, thanks for joining me.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.